So there was that just ease of communication and allowing people to be people, which I think is one of the big things that we have to work at with our educational system. Allow people to come into it who they are and leave with it being enriched.
And that's true in a psychology class or
any class,
an English class. Or
can you fire them up?
Yeah,
with what you got to share with them because you love your topic.
Mm-hmm.
Go teach them how to love it.
I'm Richard Moore. This is the Pathfinder, the podcast where we visit with faculty, administrators, policymakers, researchers, really anyone making a difference in the lives of students at community colleges. It's a partnership between the Texas Success Center and the Texas Community College Teachers Association. As this series goes on, we'll be talking with all kinds of folks in every aspect of the community college world, including faculty in the liberal arts, program directors who run international education programs at their colleges, mathematicians, researchers, people in the political world. But since this is our very first episode, we decided to start in the classroom, talking with teachers. I sat down with Warren Donworth, Tom Gingras, and William Bastas in the welding program at Austin Community College. These teachers love welding. They love the tools and the techniques. They love the precision and the attention it takes to get a piece just right. And they love the students. You can hear it in their voices when they're talking about the program and the people who've gone through it with them. We talked in mid-September 2017, and they even let us go back into the shop to see what the students were working on. It was hot and a little noisy, but I think you'll enjoy the chance to hear just what it takes to build an extraordinary program for the more than 400 students they currently have enrolled. Let's get started. This is Warren Donworth. So you're the director of the Welding Technology Program here at Austin Community College.
Well, I used to be. I did that for 13 years, and then there's a fellow who is now the director of that. But I was the director of the department. We called it the department chair during its formative period.
Yes, and you helped organize the program in its early days, is that right, into what it is now?
I stand accused.
Well, tell us about the program. What is it like? What are the types of students you work with, and what are they doing with your program?
Well, it's an unusual program. It's, if I can be immodest about this, it's really a program in which there are some programs that we have here that are not offered anywhere else. Mm-hmm. It is a traditional welding program, and we specify it as code welding because we weld in accordance with codes like electricians and plumbers and so on do. But a number of years back, and this is going back to the late 80s and early 90s, we started moving into the field of art metals, in which we were teaching, and we still do in a very successful way, how to use artistic inclinations for people and what they might have as that venue, and applying it into the welding field. And so as time went on, it progressed from a single course in sculpture to many more courses. We had established certificates. We went into degrees. We have a degree now, one degree that we just started this recently within the last couple of years on blacksmithing.
Is that right?
And we are the only community college in the United States that has an actual workforce degree in blacksmithing.
And so what kind of work are they doing? Is this jewelry? Is it sculptures you'd see outside? What are they producing?
Well, yes, we say that we can build anything here from a ring all the way up to a skyscraper. So in the case of the Art Metals program, it really divides into several venues. First of all, there is metal sculpture, and we call that Art Metals. And so that is what one might think about as far as sculpture goes. The students learn how to sculpt things. And that's one program with its certificates and its degrees. But we also have, as I say, a program in blacksmithing, and it has the supporting certificates and its degree as well. And so blacksmithing is what most people would think of it. It's banging on metal, but we do produce artistic applications of it. We also created a jewelry department here, and to their credit, the jewelry department has flown off on its own wings. It's now over at the Highland Learning Center, its own department now. So we've given rise to some very intriguing programs.
That's terrific. Now, who are your students? What kinds of careers are they looking to get into?
Well, since we're workforce, they are anticipating going to work in one of these areas. And so there's really not a typical student. Now, that's easy to say because community colleges certainly have atypical students. But we have folks that are right out of high school. We have people who are retired, people who are minimal in education, and people who have PhDs. We have physicians have taken courses. We have attorneys. So it's a very broad spectrum. And the students who are in these courses are homogenized, so they get to rub shoulders with these other folks, and it's very interesting.
That's great. Do you have industry partners you work with?
Yes, we do too. We in each of these areas, there's a unique application in industry. So on the welding side, yes, we funnel people into jobs, and that's because of the shortage in welders. That's a very easy fit.
Yeah.
It's not so easy in the case of, say, art and metals. And so what the advantage we have here is that, just like you may have heard the term, somewhat deprecating, but it's the starving artist. Well, it is true up to a point, but once an artist sticks with something long enough and they develop a portfolio, they develop a reputation, then they can fly on their own. But wouldn't it be nice, and this was our original theory, wouldn't it be nice if we had a system by which students could come here, learn industrial welding, get employed, and as we'd say, support their art habit until they develop a portfolio, and then they can go into that full-time if they wish.
And so your students, when they come in, do you talk with them about their options? Do they kind of already know what they want to do? What kind of conversations happen around that?
Yes. Well, we have a lot of SOTAs. Now, SOTA, S-O-T-A, is our euphemism for students older than average.
Okay.
And so they have a pretty good idea of the general area they're working toward. Others don't, and so with a program as diverse as this, it's not as though someone could come to the door and we could say, well, take welding course A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. We almost have to interview them. And we'll say, well, are your interests are the artistic end? Are you a technical person? Do you know yet? Do you have classes? Do you want to take classes in the morning, evening, or afternoon? Do you have a work schedule? So we go through a retinue there of what it takes to get them placed in the proper program.
Okay. And so you really tailor the experience for each student that way.
I would have to think the last time that we even had somebody who graduated with a degree exactly as it's published in the book. So yes, there's a lot of tailoring.
Mm-hmm. And do you help connect them with job possibilities when they leave with these industry partners?
Yes, and it works like this. See, Austin Community College started in 1973. Now, those of us that are here now weren't there in 1973, but we are the inheritors of that program. So the people who went through back in those days have gone on to become professional welders. They have their own businesses. Mm-hmm. So where do they turn for employees? Well, back to their alma mater. So that's an easy fit. We line them up either personally, but because of the shortage of welders, most welders are not going to just drop out of school and take a job unless financially they need to do that. So we post jobs on the board, and if they want to pursue those, they can. But it's a very nice way that we've been here so long that it makes people very employable.
Now, how did you get into this? Were you doing welding and then you got into teaching, or what was your path?
Oh, well, now that's an interesting story to me, but I don't know how interesting it is to your listeners. But let me start out this way. So I actually have a background in music, in classical music. So I went to the University of North Texas, and I had gotten interested not only in the performance, but I gravitated toward a field called musicology, which is the study of history, music history, literature, theory. And I had an attack of common sense because I did not see any want ads for musicologists. It's just not something you see in the paper. Needed one musicologist, make good money, get paid on Friday.
Uh-huh.
However, you don't leave that behind. That's something that stays with you, and it does with me even to this day. But I got into welding as a way of making a living, and I found that it was very fascinating, so I became what is known as a non-destructive testing technician and a welding inspector. That was my particular interest. And for the benefit of those who might not know what NDT is, it's the industrial equivalent of a lot of medical applications like sonography for blood flow, except we use high-frequency sound for testing metals, that sort of thing. So I had worked in industry in that field, always keeping my interest in music on back burner. And I began teaching here part-time. And so a position came open in 1989 when the director of the department was promoted upward as a result of a retirement. So I became the director of the department chair in 1989.
I'm really fascinated with the ways people wind up where they wind up. That you couldn't have anticipated how it was all going to play out. Well, you started music, but then you maybe you see threads that the music is showing up in the art dimension of your welding program. That there's an affinity there.
Exactly right. When I was going to school at North Texas, if someone had said, well, you would someday be the director of a welding program, I would have said, I was studying music, I would have said, no, you need to replay that tape because it dislodged somehow. That's not going to be my future. But here I am. It's fascinating.
Well, we're talking about guided pathways all the time. You've got students, well, you've got all these programs developed around getting students in and through a program, but we often don't go in straight lines.
No, much like a guided missile or like a shark hunting prey, you go back and forth, you attack, or a sailboat, but you finally hit a goal, and I'm very happy you're doing this.
That's terrific. And I like the way that the experiences you had in your past probably support the work that you're doing now in ways you wouldn't have anticipated.
I would never have anticipated it would come out like this. But if I have any talent, though, it's being able to recognize talent in other people. So when you recognize folks that are on the same wavelength, and you can get them employed, and they can go sort of like at 4th of July, the Roman candles that go up, and then there are spin-offs from there. Then this has been a very interesting social experiment, really. It's a welding department, but it's also a social experiment.
Well, and you're watching your students go through what you went through, trying to find their way, and they this is an important step they're taking, and you want to make sure they get the most out of it.
Yeah, that's true. They start out on our class roster as students, but really they become friends. And so we have folks that go back into the late 80s, for us that are here now, early 90s, and they've all gotten a few more gray hairs and crow's feet, but we're formerly students, and now they're friends.
What would you say you have in this program that is essential to its success? You've got great facilities, you've got great faculty. What are the ingredients for a successful program that really help your students get the most out of it?
I would say in a word, it's synergism.
Okay.
It's the fact that there's so much going on here, and there's so many avenues open to every student who sees other students doing whatever they may be interested in. And then the students then can take virtually anything. They still have to take a curriculum, which leads to a degree, but most of them will reach out and they will try something in an area that they would never anticipated. There is the stigma, which is incorrect, and that is that artistic people are of a certain bent and technical people of a certain bent. And if I can characterize that in a silly comparison, it's that the artistic people think that technical people are myopic, they have pocket protectors, they're always carrying calculators, and they will walk out in front of a bus while they're solving a formula. On the other hand, the technical people say, well, the artistic people are like the big bird on Sesame Street. They can't get to work on time, but when they do, they're given to sudden spurts of inspiration, and neither of these is correct. So when you get them all together and you just shake up the basket, they realize there is no stigma for a technical person to take an artistic course or an artistic person to be technical. So it allows them to develop in ways that they probably would never have thought they could.
Does that involve you and the faculty in your department interacting with faculty in other areas? I mean, if you're trying to give students these sorts of wide experiences, are there things happening in the background that y'all have to coordinate to make that happen?
Not so much in the logistic way or budget-wise, but as we know, if not, I should say that the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board says we have to have competencies. We have to teach competencies in the general core, but they are not specific. It's up to the department to delineate which of those there are. So while we do state what are those general core courses, then there's a lot of variety for what someone could take. So yes, we know the faculty members in the other areas. In the case of, say, technical communications, the technical communications people will tailor our students to writing technical reports that are germane to welding, for example. So there's that interplay there that's really has helped the program as well.
So your faculty are talking with the English faculty or the math faculty to talk about what competencies you need your students to have in their disciplines.
Yes, and that's especially true in the math area,
Mm-hmm.
because we are dealing in the technical sense. We're talking about code welding, the sorts of things, and art metals as well, but you have to be able to cipher. And so I've worked with people in the math department to the point of even establishing a course, Mathematics for Measurement, which is a coordination, or we call it, we work under something called the Workforce Communication, Workforce Course, WICM.
Yes, the Workforce Education Course Manual.
Course manual, that's
Yes.
right, excuse me.
It's a mouthful.
Oh, it is. And so, yes, we have courses that are particular for our students that they can take. Now, I'm not saying that they were designed especially for welding departments, because that can't be the case of the general core.
Mm-hmm.
But the faculty members that we deal with have always been amenable to making those adjustments to our students, as long as they meet the course requirements.
Well, I can see your faculty are in the best position to see your students as complete people, and they don't just need to know how to arc weld. There's a whole lot that goes into that, and so it seems like it would be sort of a natural part of the work to have those conversations and build those competencies and see it more as a team effort than just one person teaching one class.
Yes, that's precisely the way it works.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I've been doing in these conversations we're having with people is to ask them if there are particular books that they've read that have had a big influence on them, and it can be anything from things you've done in your work, books that you've read that affect your work, or just a novel you've read, or a historical biography. But do you have any books do you think our folks should know about?
Well, first of all, I get the drudgery part out of the way.
Okay.
And one is the welding code. And so I have to read that. I have to stay up on it. Now, do I go to sleep reading that at night? It can certainly put you to sleep quickly. But I have to stay up to date on all the kinds of codes that are propagated by the American Welding Society.
Uh-huh.
But as far as I'm concerned personally, there's one that I'm reading right now, which is The Advancement of Music in Enlightenment England, from 1600 to 2000, by a fellow fascinating author, Tim Eggington. And remember I said that I was interested in musicology?
Uh-huh.
Well, that doesn't go away. So I keep that on back burner. And this is something that's interested me for a long time, what's called the long 18th century in English history, and the music as it occurred at that time. And so that's one of the books. I also read one. Now, this could sound very tedious, so why would one want to do this? But it's the Pimlico Chronology of Events in Britain. And it is just that. It's a chronology year after year and the months within the year. And some would say, well, isn't that a lot like reading the Manhattan phone directory? Well, no, it's not, because I like to just drop my finger on a date and then find out about that. So those are three of them that I really enjoy.
That's fantastic. And I like this idea that your students are coming to you seeking one thing and just having a whole world open up to them. Because it seems important to me that community colleges are helping people develop skills to get jobs, but we're really creating citizens and viable adults that goes beyond just any single thing. The world needs to be a little bigger when they leave than when they got here.
Well, you're absolutely 100% on. And we have to remember that in the workforce area, we have to have come from industry. So we have to bring those skills with us. We also have to have degrees. So we have folks here with ranging from certainly a bachelor's degree all the way up through PhD, master's degrees. So we've got a very diverse faculty, and it's very difficult to find people to fill those positions who have an industrial background, in the case of our art metals folks, who are also artists and who can meet the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board requirements. So our students look to them and see that, well, wait a minute. If you can do that, I can do that too. Mm-hmm. And yes, it does make for a very broad person that comes out. When they exit the door, they are quite a changed person.
Warren, y'all are doing amazing work here. I sure appreciate your time being with us.
Well, I appreciate the time working with you, Richard.
Stick around for more of our interview with Warren Donworth, who will be joined by Tom Gingras and William Bastas, director of the metal sculpture and blacksmithing programs at Austin Community College. But first, let's find out about some upcoming events for our community college folks in Texas. On November 6th, 7th, and 8th, the Success Center will be hosting its third annual Pathways Institute in San Antonio. This program will give people at colleges that are implementing guided pathways an opportunity to work with their teams in focused programs, as well as connect with colleagues across the state and hear from researchers in the field. You can find out more on the TAC website at tacc.org. Also, be sure to make your plans to attend this year's TCCTA convention up in the Dallas area. This is the largest gathering of community college folks in Texas, and there will be lots of programs covering more than 50 disciplines, as well as teaching hacks and time to meet up with friends across the state who share your passion for teaching. Visit tccta.org for all the program and travel information. Now let's get back to the conversation. Tom Gingras directs the Metal Arts program at ACC. In our conversation, he reflects on the evolution of his work and what he's learned as a teacher. Here's Tom Gingras.
Well, Tom, thanks for being with us. I'm just walking around the shop. What I see is there's a lot of kind of kinetic energy,
Right.
creative energy, people kind of bouncing off each other, not physically, hopefully, but,
Right.
but ideas anyway.
Yes.
But also there's equipment in there, and so if you're in there for one program, you're getting exposed to so many other different media.
Right.
How does that work? What does that open up for the student?
Well, I can tell you that's a huge question,
Okay.
actually. But I get art metal students that come in and spend 4 semesters with me, maybe even get a certificate in art metals, and then they find out about the inspection program.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got one guy right now from Portland that is moving in that direction right now. He wants to be an inspector because he wants to make some good money, and he likes that work. He thinks he's going to like that work. So that was because of sharing the hallway and Warren Donworth's wonderful presence here. Mr. Jolly, he gets to draw people into his part of the program. William's part of the program is awesome. He pretty much single-handedly developed that part of the program. With the help of Trent Temple and some people that were also involved in the program at the time, Wendell Broussard, Lars Stanley, who are shop owners in the area. But they taught here for a while. And so that's the cross-fertilization, I think, is a huge factor in a person finding his or her own way through the it would be like through the AWS show in Houston, where they have every possible aspect of welding displayed in first 3 floors of the Brown Center in Houston. And so there's so many aspects that people could get into, prototyping.
And how does that work with, what's your observation of your students' interactions where they discover and start making these connections? Is it, conversations with faculty, or the students talking with each other? Do they just go, they're curious, so they can look at a piece of equipment and start up a conversation? All the above?
All of the above. And there's another factor in here, and that's that creative people kind of get a bad rap in public school, sorry to say. But the kids that are off the charts creatively often don't fit. And so we have kind of a family assemblage here of like-minded people that have found their way to the motherland. They've found their way to a place where they're accepted for who they are and allowed to open the gate and run with the wild horses.
So their creativity gets to fuel what the experience
Right,
is.
and I'm going to have to use the word fun. I believe that we make learning fun. From talking with William and Warren, they're good people and they have good sense of humor, and they're entertaining to be with. I think that's been a big factor in allowing these people to learn, rather than forcing them down, the straight and narrow.
Well, just now I went back in the shop and you were in there working on a piece, and it looked like there were a bunch of students around you also working. What is that? What's going on there? I mean, I like this idea. You're just another person at a bench working. You happen to be the teacher, and so they may be coming to you for questions, but
Right.
they're also seeing you work.
Right. Yes, and I think that's another strength in the whole thing is I'm just like them. It's just I'm 40 years down the road, And
You're them in 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I happen to have landed a really good gig that allowed me to buy shoes for my kids, and send them to school, buy school supplies. Oh my God. And so they get to see how I do stuff, and I'll be working sometimes, and somebody will come up and stand next to me, and I'll say, "Can I help you with something? Do you need help?" And they said, "No, I'm just watching."
Just watching.
Yeah, just to see how you do it,
Uh-huh.
And that's a cool thing. That's a good learning experience for them, and working right alongside them as they grow, I'm also growing. And that keeps me fresh. That keeps me when I do my demos, for instance, I might have discovered something the week prior to the demo on a particular thing like MIG welding or whatever, and I just bring that information to the table also, so that they're getting stuff that it's taken me 40 years to get.
Well, it seems like there's this balance between, on the one hand, being as expansive as possible and letting them experience it all and make connections in kind of a serendipitous way because they happen to be walking through the shop that day and saw something interesting.
Yeah.
And at the same time having some focus where they get something out of it. They're learning specific skills. I was talking with William, and he was saying there's a lot of discipline to it. He doesn't let them pick their own projects. He picks the project.
Yeah.
So talk about that. How do you put those two pieces together of just open it wide and let them have an experience that isn't completely planned out on the one hand, and have the kind of structure that leads to a productive learning experience?
Right. Well, and that's another beauty in the thing is every instructor gets to have his or her own personality and bring what their strength is to the program, and that's been, I think, a real positive part of it. I have people that will take a Bastas class after taking a woodward class, and it's still Blacksmithing 101 or whatever you want to call it, but they're there learning new stuff from another guy. And so if it's about life learning experience, then that works great. And if it's just about getting running people through the cattle chute, then it's a different thing. So there's a lot of heart, I feel like, in what we do. There's a lot of passion. We all are passionate about what we do, and so we bring that to the table with the students, and I feel like we are inspirers. I think that's a big part of our job. So, and then I might get somebody taking 4 of my courses, or 2 of William's, 2 of mine, whatever. The 5th semester, they're going to want to go over to the technical side and learn to weld better. And I really like this MIG welding, man, or I wanted to find out about TIG and stainless, or something. So they go to the technical side very naturally.
So, but there are some hard edges. I mean, there certainly when it comes to safety, there are things you don't do.
Sure.
There's a right and a wrong way.
Right.
When you're welding.
Right.
So
there's
you're
an
really,
intuitive way. Intuitive way.
Well, but
that's the bell going off and saying, "Whoa, I don't think you should do that." And we try to turn that on.
Okay.
If
so
people are relaxed, that's on.
And they get it. I'm doing this right. Or,
Yeah. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and I guess I'm interested in this because there is a lot of talk in higher education about making sure students come out of their experience in college with something they can use. either to get a job or to be a successful adult, in
Right.
whatever sense.
Right.
These conversations you're having with students, you want to kind of open it wide so they can experience it all. Do you talk with them about these are some possibilities out there? This is
Sure.
what,
Yeah, I get
what does
asked.
that look like?
I get asked a lot of times, where can I get a job?
Mm-hmm.
And I have several shops that I can have them call today and see if there's any work available. And that's cool. And those guys either were students here, or they were faculty here, or they're longtime friends in the community. Like I've known Lars Stanley for 45 years or whatever, because I was a draftsman and he was an architect, and so I knew him for the metalwork that he did as an architect, building metalwork railings on houses that he designed and stuff like that. So that kind of thing is really great, to be able to put the student in the slipstream of go make a living. Go make a living with this. You can do it. You can do it. You've got the stuff.
Well, it's kind of frustrating to feel like you've got this skill, but you don't quite get how to convert that into a future.
Right. And marketing. Marketing yourself, which is the big downfall for most artists. They don't know how to do it. They're afraid to do it. They're whatever. I think we learn a lot of that stuff in those oppressive times. How not to brag on yourself, and that kind of thing.
When you're working with your students, do they come up with their own projects? Do you assign projects? How does that work?
I show them initially a difficult weld. It's a fourth or fifth on the list of American Welding Society weld joint situations. It's called a lap joint, and I have what I call the order of heating, which is a flat basically taking more heat than an edge, and edge taking half the heat that a flat does, and then a corner taking a quarter of the heat that the flat does. Okay, so they have to learn how to think about the metal before they approach it with a torch. And once they get it and they can do a weld across that project, then I have them weld a piece of 1/4-inch round bar onto it and bend it and shape it and do what they want, or they can take more coupons and they can build something geometric with cubes or squares of sheet metal. Either way works, but I want them to begin creating based on the work that's in front of them. So they've got an interest in doing more of these weld joints. Or I thought maybe I'd try putting corners together and see what that's like. Or this bending thing. I'm having a lot of fun just bending in the air and drawing in the air. And so they kind of go their own direction from that standpoint. And then they may scrap that, throw it in the trash bin altogether, and say, oh, I got this idea for a mailbox, or I got this idea for a trivet or a wine rack, or I want to do a hand, or that kind of stuff. And that's kind of where the sculpture people separate themselves from the people that are more inclined to go into blacksmithing or more inclined to go into a fabrication mode.
So they kind of self-select.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And that is, I feel like my job is to introduce them to all these different aspects, and then they get to pick and choose. I want to use these. I want to use these. Kind of like playing bells.
So they're kind of choosing a path,
Right.
but more intuitively. I'm drawn more to this than that.
I feel is okay here, and I am interested. That's a word you never use in academia. Oh, that's interesting. I want it to be interesting. I want them to be able to walk around it and see the form from the other side, because something I put here indicated that there was something interesting on the back.
So you learn the craft, but it sounds like you also learned how to teach in these experiences. Do you draw on that a lot on how you teach now?
I would say, you know what, I'm going to have to, yes, I can defer to, and I think Gary Nofke's influence was huge, in part because of his absolute mastery of the material. And he was kind of short and brusque with you if he was not pleased, which I try not to do. But I would say that I do more of an intuitive thing with the students, and I maybe more open my heart to them. That's right. That's right.
What does that look like?
That's great. Because I just had a great discussion with one of the African American girls in my class. I asked her if she was an activist, and she started this whole thing. And her father was a Vietnam vet who was just honored. Some powerful stuff, and she really opened to me at that point. She took her phone out. She showed me these incredible portraits that she'd done of Martin Luther King, the big 10 big names, right, in humanistic causes, and they were incredible. So yes,
yeah.
And whoa, I got to learn something too. You know, I got this person's heart touched my heart. You know,
and it started by you asking her a question.
Yeah, just intuitively, just like, well, let's talk about this today. You know, and forget about the welding thing for a minute, and let's be human together. You know,
And then that kind of frees her up to lead with her heart when she's doing her welding.
right.
That's what we do here.
Yeah, and I told her, I said, it's like a Buddhist meditation. You got this flame, and you're watching the flame, and you're watching what it does to transform this hard material that God only could work with volcano, you know. And so, and I just, it was totally off the top of my head. I'd never had that thought before, but it just popped out, you know. And so it was entertaining for both of us. But yeah, so there was that just ease of communication and allowing people to be people, which I think is one of the big things that we have to work at with our educational system. Allow people to come into it who they are and leave with it being enriched.
And that's true in a psychology class or
Any class.
an English class. Or
Can you
engineering.
fire them up?
Yeah.
With what you got to share with them because you love your topic. Go teach them how to love it. I mean, that may be too esoteric. I don't know,
Not at all. Yeah, that's what a teacher does. Is you love your discipline, you love your students, and something happens.
Yeah, and it's not like it needs to be. There's another aspect I have to throw in here too, and that is the being assertive. And it's a problem that art people have. When you're welding and the metal is not doing what you want it to do, but you have the vision and you hold the vision clearly of what you want it to look like, and you make it do it, and you find a way, add more heat, change the torch tip to a bigger tip size or whatever, but you find a way to assert yourself and put your will with the will of the metal. It's more like that. It's more like combining than it is, absolute dominance over, which I think is a big mistake that humans make on the planet these days. But when you're working with a material, you say, okay, I know this about you, and I know this about you, and I know this about you. So let's do this. Let's do this together.
It's a great approach to teaching too, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You have a clear idea in mind about what the course entails and all that, but you're also seeing what your students, how they're responding and what they're capable of, and
Right.
how you can connect.
Yes, exactly, and how they can make it a part of their life. That's a big commitment when you got to spend thousands of dollars to get what you need for equipment. And I've had people, miraculous things happen. One lady saw an ad on eBay or something, and this lady's husband had died, and he had a full shop. And she called the lady up. and became friends with his wife, and the lady gave her a truckload full of stuff for $300. You know, she got an anvil, and she got a crank forge, and a bunch of hammers and stuff. It was like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
So those things happen to my students just because now they know their direction. You know, the needle pointed north, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
like, aha. And there are those aha moments, you know, where people come to a realization. They may go through the dry desert on the way, you know, dragging all fours, but they get to this other end where it's like, oh, cool, there's the water hole.
Well, someone was just getting through the hard part of that first semester.
Yeah.
You don't know an anvil from a hammer, and you've got to go through that hard period for it to just start to make sense.
Yes, and you see the damage in, I call them damaged learners, okay? And you see the damage in their learning background right away, pretty much, where they're afraid of petrified. Some are petrified of making a mistake. And some are real reserved, and they want to work real small and hide their work from you. And you say, "Can I help you with that?" And they'll say, "Oh no, I'm okay, I got it."
Mm-hmm.
You know, but you know they don't.
Uh-huh.
You know, they're just putting it off for another time when they're feeling more comfortable with their relationship with you, for instance.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, when you got a safety first environment like we have, it's real important to break through some barriers right away, you know, in that regard. So,
But that, feeling safe with the people you're around is kind of the necessary condition for a lot of other stuff to happen.
Yeah. And I lay that out there when we're doing the syllabus on the first day. I'm here. I'm your friend. I'm here for you. I will support you if you have difficulties during the course of the semester. Come to me and talk to me. Just communicate with me, and I'll make sure that you make it through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you quit on me, then I quit on you. You know, and that's not going to work for anybody. But I've had people. I had one guy that was a hurricane victim coming up from New Orleans. He had no money. I don't know how he even lived at all. How he ate. I was giving him $20 every couple of classes, you know, and he got a job, and he was paying me back every week the $20 that I'd loaned him. It was cool. It was like, wow, this is great.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up graduating with a technical welding degree,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and more power to him, you know, so great. So
It's amazing the difference it makes, just coming someplace that has, this is a room full of potential, and
Right.
the students come in,
Right.
and something happens. You know?
yes, yeah, and it's almost like they can't help it. You know, if they stick around, they can't help it. They're gonna get bit by the bug. You know.
It's amazing, and so there's so many possibilities. It's not something that you can predict. The student comes in and they're going to do something with it that maybe you didn't anticipate, or
Right.
sometimes they do. The thing you would have expected, but sometimes not.
Right.
And you want to hold that loosely to allow for that.
Absolutely, you hit the nail right on the head. Hold it loosely. I learned a long time ago that I should never criticize or judge somebody's work as terrible. In the first 3 or 4 weeks or 5 weeks of class, they could have the ugliest thing in the world, and it could turn into a masterpiece when it's said and done. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I've learned a lot by just sitting and watching, you know, and observing how they come alive, what it is that cranks their tractor. You know.
Well, Tom, I sure appreciate your time. This has
My
been
pleasure.
a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate the great work y'all are doing here.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
That was Tom Gingras. While we were there, I also had a chance to visit with William Bastas, who runs the blacksmithing program. It's one of only a handful in the United States, and William is finding tremendous interest among his students as they learn the craft and see how it connects to other metal arts. Here's William Bastas.
5 to 10%, I would say, of the students, from raw students that come to my class, know nothing about blacksmithing. In fact, they come to my class because my class is called metalsmithing. They don't even realize that we're going to be heating steel and hammering it. They just thought it sounded interesting.
I saw them the other day. They were hammering those nails.
Yeah.
And just getting, it seems like handling the equipment and the materials you could tell they're getting used to the whole idea.
They are, and like a moth to the flame. You can use a lot of metaphors, but in the olden days, there'd be these kids that would just gather around the blacksmith shop because it's fascinating.
Uh-huh.
You have fire, and you have power, and you have, sometimes grumpy men, but they're like taking this hot steel, and they're with their power and their mind, they're shaping it,
Yeah.
and so it's a fascinating thing, and so some people have had this fascination, and that's why they come here. If they know nothing about what we're doing, they get it right away. It's like, wow, this is cool, and then all of a sudden it's like, I want to be a blacksmith, and I have to temper them a little bit. It's like, well, let's pay attention to making sure that we have the skills first, and then let's look at the opportunities that you have as a blacksmith.
Now you teach people how to make their own tools.
Yeah.
How advanced is that? Does that come much later? I mean, that seems like a very meticulous instrument you're creating.
It is. Well, I mean, I led a group of students for two summers down to Santa Clara del Cobre in Michoacan, Mexico, and we studied at the university down there. It was Secate 166, and so they learned hot coppersmithing. But we toured local smithies, and we can call them smithies even though they're forging copper, not steel, but they're still smiths. And their opinion was that if you don't make your own tools, you're half a smith.
Mm.
And so if you understand how to make your own tools, it's a lesson in its own, and it kind of liberates you as far as what forms that you can create. And really, in order to be competitive in blacksmithing, as an artist blacksmith or architectural blacksmith, you have to create forms that are contemporary. You have to work within the current movements of architectural design, because basically it's like that's what's dictating what people put in their homes. They're not doing colonial hardware. But if you don't know how to make contemporary current work and put your spin on it, and that means making your own tooling, because everything is by hammer and hand. All crafts do stand by. Everything is created with the hammer, the tongs, the anvil, and then all of this ancillary equipment. So really the first part of the semester of the first class, we make tools. We're going to start.
Is that right?
We're going to start making tongs next week. You understand what's going on from the atomic nature of it. When you're heat treating, for instance, it's like there's no way that you can heat treat unless you know what's going on atomically, how the atoms rearrange themselves into different crystals, where the carbon goes, what the carbon does, what the alloys do, what happens when you heat it, what happens when you quench it, what happens when you hammer it. Working steel is like being a baker. When you're making dough, you've got all of this. You've got this flour, and you got a little bit of yeast, and when you add water, and that turns into bread. And that's the same thing with iron and carbon and steel. And if you know how to roll it, if you know how to let it rise, you understand the internal structure of it. I'll use metaphors, and obviously you don't need the metaphor, but sometimes it's easier for people to grasp it because steel just looks like this inert material, just like glass. You think, oh, that's an inert material. It's like glass is liquid. It's like, how possibly can it be liquid? Well, steel becomes liquid even when it's solid. When you raise it above 1450 degrees, it's called the transformation temperature. It's a solid solution, and in that solid solution, things move.
Mm.
And then that's why we heat it to shape it, because when it's below 1450 degrees, it's solid. When it's 1500 degrees, it's really a liquid, even though it's solid, but it's glowing. And so when you learn these things in blacksmithing, because you have to, because in order to be successful in shaping and heat treating, if you're going to make a knife or you're going to make a sledgehammer, you have to understand what's going on. And that translates to when you're welding. It's like that's in the back of your mind. That's actually like permeated your mind, because you know the malleability, you know the ductility, you know what the carbon and the alloys and what spot heat is doing to it, and you know what preheating and post-heating, and the list goes on. It would make a much better welder if you're a blacksmith or just have some blacksmithing training.
Now let's talk about the history, because I notice in your shop you've got your students there at the anvil. They're all working, but then they take breaks, and you've got a large table with a bunch of books on it with art history and other texts like that. Where does that come into your instruction?
Well, there's a little struggle between the traditionalist of blacksmithing and the young smiths, the new guns, and they want to take blacksmithing, which rightfully so. They want to take it into the future through sculpture in new forms, and they want to not be constrained by the past. And I think that there needs to be a bridge between the old smiths and the new smiths. The old smiths, they disdain electric arc welding. They disdain use of power hammers. They disdain use of electricity in a shop. I demonstrated in a shop in Houston that we started at 9 o'clock in the morning. We had to stop at 5 because it got dark. No electricity. So everything's hand crank, or you got the bellows, and so that's quaint, but it's not practical. On the other hand, if you don't understand fire welding, and fire welding is kind of one of those. There's only 7 skills to learn in blacksmithing, but logarithmically, if you add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus, it creates thousands of different options, and so it keeps you fascinated, because even though there's these 7 skills, there's just this vast array of variations, and what we need to do is train students with like I said, a foot in the past and a foot in the future, and so they have all of the skills associated with a journeyman smith, and I refuse to let that go, and that means we have to learn some of the old forms. And what are old forms? What are old-fashioned? What is antiquated? Well, I have to make sure that I can't assume students walk in with a working knowledge of math, which a lot of times they don't. And so we're remedially teaching them how to add and subtract fractions, what the markings on a tape measure mean. And to me, I think that's a little disappointing from high school system, because it's like, is that what our job is at a community college level or maybe university level, is to remedially teach skills that are like survival skills? So the same metaphor, the same example is that if you don't know your history, and that's history, whether it's world history or whether it's art history or whether it's applied art history, which happened in art movements, applied art followed fine art movements. And so when you see these cataclysmic events that happen, recent history, World War I, World War II, that changed the way people look at art, which changed the way they look at buildings and products, then you need to understand that. And so that way, if you get where we were and the thread of how it came to be where we are, then you know how to pull elements that were, so you can speak a language that otherwise is not available to you. And that's what fine art training is all about. They teach you a language, and that's probably something that's snobbish if you're a fine artist and you're making a piece of work and that piece of work speaks to other fine artists, but if you haven't had that training, then it's you don't know what they're talking about. Well, that's what my approach is to crack that code, because I want to make sure that the students understand the history, the movements, what the salient elements of those movements were, so they can speak that language too, and they can look at a piece and they can critically define that piece. If they can't define that piece, they might look at it and it's wow, that's nice, and they don't know why. And a lot of new art is based on old art, but it's not revealed, and so it can have just a seasoning of art deco in it. It can have a seasoning of Renaissance. But if we understand what, the medieval times, and how the church was oppressive, and how that affected the way that 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional items were depicted, and then in the Baroque, where people were traveling and they were experiencing new cultures, and they wanted to build these buildings, the cathedrals that were higher than any cathedral that had been created before, and when you walk into these cathedrals, you just feel the presence of God. And so when you see that work in the Baroque, and you understand that it was all about this, like an opera singer is singing at the top of their lungs, that's what the culture was about. Then you kind of understand that in ironwork too, and when you see Baroque ironwork, it's oh, I get it, and they were using medieval elements too, like the shun ring, as far as representing immortality. And so when you start putting these things into your contemporary work, you're communicating with fine artists, you're communicating with historians, you're communicating with craftsmen. And if you reveal it, you're communicating with with people that are untrained in those arts, but at the same time, it lets them be able to share in appreciation of your work.
Temperature.
Yeah.
That's all one conversation. There's so much going on, but it all is a part of the whole enterprise.
It is. I mean, and another thing we do is we bring well-respected artists to ACC with an honorarium. And in 2003, I bought Uri Hafey from Israel, and so he did a lecture in that metallurgy lab, and he did a demonstration. And then recently we've had Daniel Miller, and we've had Mark Asprey. We've had all of these like really important internationally known Smiths come to Austin Community College to lecture. And Mark Asprey said something that really struck me, was that he's got one of two ways of training somebody. He can train somebody to be an employee and show them how to do something, or he can train somebody to be their own artist and craftsman to show them why he's doing something. And so I'm doing kind of both, but my main focus is why we're doing this. And so we could topically approach this so that I could find some kind of pool of fabrication shops that it would accept our Robotrons, that they know how to forge a taper and they can do that 1,000 times in a day. Or my approach is that I'd like for them to get beyond the entry-level job. And now it's a business. You learn how people generate work, what style they're working in, how they sell, how they market, how they price, how they install, what their finishes are. There's a phrase in blacksmithing where you take everything they hand you in your hands and you steal the rest with your eyes. So you have to have that journeyman, even though we don't have a guild system, you have to continue with that because there's a reason for that. And you don't become a master until you have worked with 2, 3, or as many other people that you can, until you feel the confidence that you actually have something to offer. I wouldn't open up a shop unless you felt like I can do that. I like the feedback that I get from other programs. I like the feedback I get from Penland. So I taught Penland a month ago, and they say, yeah, we're really impressed with the students that come out of your program. At Southern Illinois University, they said, yeah, we love getting your students because they are ready. And that to me feels really good. My students have gone to become artists in residences at the National Ornamental Metal Museum. They've gone on to open up their own smithies. They've gone to Europe and working for other blacksmiths in Europe. I mean, that's like kind of the holy grail when you're working in Switzerland, you're working in Germany, and then these people start recognizing you. I had a smith come from Germany. He had just gotten his master's. They still have a guild system in Germany in some regards. It's a modern guild system, and we ought to really emulate their philosophy because they are hard-nosed as far as teaching like skills, and these skills are like have to be like top notch. Anyway, so he heard about me and the program, and so from his instructor, and I was like really flattered that he sought me out. And so this guy comes in, he wasn't wearing lederhosen, he might as well have been, and he's got these 2 friends from Germany that accompanied him, and he had a list of people that he needed to meet in the United States, and so it was so that through the grapevine it means more to me than what a student tells me. It's like, oh, your class was great. Well, compared to what? But if comparable programs say it's like, well, your students are really prepared, well, that feels great to me. And I had a situation come up in 1998 when I was artist in residence at the National Ornamental Metal Museum for a year, and then Warren, we talked about that last time. He lured me back with the premise of a potential full-time position, but also just I was happier here than I was there. But when I got back, one of the blacksmiths in town, I ran into him at the scrapyard. That's where we meet. That's our social grounds. And he said, yeah, I had a couple of your students come by and apply for a job, and I was like feeling all warm and fuzzy. It's like, well, that's great. He says, and they were terrible. He says they couldn't forge a scroll. He says, like, I told him, I said, before you like come to my shop and try to like bang on a hammer, he says, you need to go home and practice on your railroad rail. And he was so condescending about it. I was like, wow, really? Well, I had comfort in the fact that I wasn't there that year, and they weren't my students, but I took it personally, and I thought, you know what, that's not going to happen. And so for that reason, it's like it is a VOTEC program, and it is a job-related program. It is a skills program. Then it's an art program. We call it art metals, and it's artist blacksmiths. But really, if I think that the way we tie in with the taxpayer-funded community, the taxpayer-funded, VOTEC facility in our community is making sure that when the students leave our program, and they do, and so one of the things that, like last night we finished our multi-tool, and I buy them like nice little Virgil's root beer. They're like $1.75 a root beer, and I got to buy 20 of them. But anyway, it's because we make a multi-tool, and at the culmination of that multi-tool, it's basically a bottle opener and a screwdriver. But you wouldn't believe how much they beam over that multi-tool, especially because it's a format where they can really display their skills, and some of them are really good, and the other ones are, well, they're learning.
Still learning, yeah.
But they all open up a bottle, and when they open up the bottle, you wouldn't believe how much joy they get. It's like, wow, look at that, it worked. So it's something that they made that works, that's a marketable product. And that's, I'm looking for skills, and I'm looking for like that enlightenment, and that what you were saying, it's like when the light finally goes on. And last night, it took 3.5 weeks for that light to go on, and it's grueling until it does this. We make a bracelet. The very first thing that they hit, that's hot, they hit that right there. Mm-hmm. And because I want to capture that very first moment that they hit a hot piece of steel. Mm-hmm. And then this is called the journeyman's bracelet. And so when you're a journeyman, they're not a journeyman just because they make a bracelet, and they suffer through this bracelet. That's a really simple forging. Uh-huh. What it does is it's made out of 1/4-inch round stock, and it starts off on this plane, and then somehow it manages to go to this plane. Mm-hmm. So that's all this does.
So it's changing, it's turning 90 degrees.
Yeah, it does that. And it's one of our little tricks in blacksmithing. And so what I want to do, again, from a metaphysical perspective, is I want to capture that very first moment that they are hammering a piece of steel. Uh-huh. And if they become, the world president of the world, then they'll be wearing this bracelet, proclaiming it's like, I remember very first time I hit a piece of steel.
Yes.
But so they'll carry that instead of like hitting something and throw it in the scrap bin. It's like, I don't remember what it was. It's like that right there is the very first thing that they hit. And a lot of my students are wearing this. It's cool to see.
You're
it's
wearing one.
I'm wearing it, because just in case my students see it, I wear one anyway. Because we do this. It's like we identify ourselves, as blacksmiths. Uh-huh. So we'll wear
an
blacksmith
belt buckle.
Yeah, we get so passionate about people who get tattoos of power hammers and leg vices, and our lab assistant last night was wearing a hat with an anvil on it and a shirt with an anvil on it. I said, man, can you get even more redundant than that?
There's a lot of pride in that. I mean,
there is.
You kind of want every discipline at the community college to have that kind of that every student. Would have, in the English department would have that
passion,
kind of,
and that's what that's what I think that I'm trying to do with the T-shirts and with the bracelet and with with the focuses that I did, and just getting that excitement. And this proclaims that I am learning a trade that is an honorable trade.
Mm-hmm.
It's dangerous. I'm working with my hands. My parents told me that there's no money in it, but I'm doing it anyway, so it's defiance. This is also this is a base metal. It's not considered an artistic material. It's not shiny. It's like, why isn't that made out of silver or platinum or gold? It's because you can take 5 minutes and you can take this base metal and you can turn it into something precious. Mm-hmm. So that's really, symbolic of where, what I'm doing with the program.
Yes.
I got flustered here, but it's like you can take it as serious as you want. You can.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, you can come in here and punch the clock, or you can say it's like, I think this is kind of important. Mm-hmm. And then if it's important, then why is it important? And then when you start asking those questions, then it's opening up the Pandora's box, and it's like, what did I just do? It's like, how important do I want to make this? If you really want to make it important, it's going to be a lot of work.
Well, William, I appreciate you letting us be here and see the shop and visit with you. It's just an amazing program you put together here.
Well, thank you. It's something, and like I said, I think it's I can look back and it's like through the times when I, had to do all this stuff, I think it was worth it because, if I don't want to get too like sentimental and saccharine about it, but I kind of do think it's important in the grand scheme of things that we don't lose these hand skills. And so, forging a nail, it's like people were delighted forging a nail, and I've done it so many times. It's kind of become, redundant. But when they forge their first nail, it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes they get a round of applause. It's like, where did that come from? It's because it's that window that was otherwise buried that it has resurfaced, and it's like, and people see it and they get it. And by us being able to have that still in a college credit program, it's pretty special.
Yeah, you're really giving your students something special.
Thanks.
That was Warren Donworth, Tom Gingras, and William Bastas, who have put together a brilliant program for welders at Austin Community College. You've been listening to the Pathfinder. If you like this show, tell a friend, subscribe, leave us a review in Apple Podcasts, share one of our episodes on social media. You can visit tccta.org to listen to our shows or grab them in your favorite podcatcher or wherever you found this one. The creator of the Pathfinder is me, Richard Moore. This episode was recorded by Gabriel Zambrano and was produced by Carol Hawkins. This has been a production of the Texas Success Center and the Texas Community College Teachers Association. We'll catch you next time on the Pathfinder.